Right, so this video we're going to be looking at the first stage of our shoot 'em up based on this excellent tutorial by Kids Can Code, where we're just going to move a green rectangle across the screen. But instead of doing it in Python, we're going to be doing it in Lua and the Love2D gaming engine. So I'll just run that for you so you can see what it looks like. The Windows actually appeared on my other screen. So we've now got this shoot 'em up, and by pressing the left and right keys, it simply moves this rectangle across the screen. It does the same thing also with the A and D keys. So we'll shut that down and we'll show you how it's working. Now I'm using ZeroBrane Studio, which I have found the best. You can use a lot of general code editors and so on, but the reason I like ZeroBrane for Love2D is the ability to be able to debug it. So it's kind of built in, and so you can stop and start it and find out what's going on much more easily. I'll go through at the end of this video how to set up ZeroBrane so that you've got the same kind of color scheme and the way this one is working. But for now, we'll just get on with how it's doing it. So you can see we've got 4 different files here. If I start with the first one, which is kind of unique to Lua, I'll just increase the font there. So we've got this one which is designed to use as a configuration file. It has to be called conf.lua, and in it you can put all kinds of different things, but all I've done here is to set the width and height of the window and the window's title. Now this t.console equals true allows you to see the console behind the game, so which is great for debugging, but you normally wouldn't want that running once you've released it. So that's you can change as you please. Now the main is, again, in any Love2D project you have to have a file called main, and that's what it looks for when you start it up. And in that main you've got a minimum of these 3 functions. Let me just close that one down. You've got love.load, love.update and love.draw. So those 3 are the basis of all Love2D games. So initially what happens when you start it up is that apart from any functions you write in yourself, it will run love.load, which allows you to set things up, and then 60 times a second it will call love.update and love.draw. Monogame is very similar in that it has a load content, or content load, I can't remember which way around it is, here, which loads everything in, and then you have an update and a draw function in Monogame, so they kind of replicate themselves there. The Python equivalents with Pygame, I've written it in such a way that we've also got a load function, an update and a draw function to try and replicate as close as possible. So when we run this, the first thing it does is it will run this love.load function here. Now this is the bit I was talking about. Let me again just increase the font a little bit here. This bit here, as far as I'm aware, is unique to ZeroBrane in that you put this in, it allows you to debug the Love2D program, which is why I use ZeroBrane. So you can run this by pressing the single button here rather than the double one, and that will debug the file there rather than running it, which is really great for getting things working. So what we're doing here is I put this little window in just to say if you want to get rid of that console from behind, then just alter the config file to delete that t.console equals true, and then it won't appear anymore. And the first thing you'll see is that we've got this player equals require player. Now this is similar to Python's import function. So you're basically saying import the player. So if we double click the player, you can see that's the player file. Now if we go back to the main here. So it's setting up the player by just simply using the player file, and then we're asking it to set the properties, giving it 3 pieces of information: 40, 50 and 500. So if we go back to player here, you can see we've got this set properties: width, height and speed. So that's 40 wide, 50 high and 500 speed. Now if you're not familiar with Lua and you're perhaps a Python user, this might look slightly odd. Again, if I just increase the font size. So this whole file starts with local player equals open and close curly brackets. Lua only has one data type, which is the table, and that will do the same job as dictionaries, as lists. In fact, you can even put functions inside it. It's a very, very comprehensive and powerful construct. And so what we're doing here is we're creating an empty table called player, and then we're actually putting inside that table an entire function: player dot set properties, player dot update. We can put variables in here, we can put all kind of stuff in here, and then we are returning that table to the calling function. So in main.lua, we're saying player equals require player. We're actually got the entire contents of player is now stored in this variable here. So it's extremely powerful. The more you play with Lua, the more you'll get to like it. So what we're doing with the set properties is to set up some things here. So we've got our basic player table. We're now adding a property to it called speed. So you put player.speed equals the speed which you supplied here. And then we're creating a rectangle by putting player.rect equals, again, another table. So we're having a table within a table. So it's a kind of a nested table. And then we're setting the x, y, width and height of that rectangle by stating those in these next 4 lines here. So you've got this table within a table that has got all these values. And so what we're basing it on here is the width and height of the window, and the figures given with the width and height that we passed in. So we passed in 40 and 50. So it's doing all the calculations here to create a rectangle table. Just to show you what I mean, if I put a stop button, let's say here, and we hit the small one here, it will start to run the program. As you can see, it is in debug mode, and it's now stopped here. Now if I put my mouse over player.rect here, you can see that it's coming up with the width is 40, x is 220 and y is 540. And if I just hover it over player, you can see the player table has got quite a lot of stuff in it. It's got the functions there, which of course it doesn't run at the moment, but it's telling us that they're there. And it's got all these other things that it's already aware of. But if I run the mouse just over the height one, there we are, player.rex.h is nil, because at the moment we haven't actually given it a value. But if I put it over w, which we did, the width is 40. So that's how the debug thing works, and it shows you roughly how a table works. So we've now defined this rectangle that has got width and x and a y, and if I now go through to the next step, which would be if I step into F10, there we are, we're now at the end of this. Our rectangle now should have a height of 50, width 40, x 220 and y 540. So you can see we've got these 4 values stored in our rectangle. So that's how the setup works. It just creates a rectangle. Now again, this is similar to a static class in C# or Java, or a Python module. So we've just got this kind of basic store of variables, but it happens to have some functions built in as well. So let's stop that at the moment. So if we go back to the main one, so we set up our player, we set its properties, and then we're setting up the game state to be equivalent to the game state play. So if we go to our shared folder now, again, we'll just increase the font there. So we've given it in a similar way. This is a static class again, so we're having this local variable called s, which is an empty table. Then we're giving that table width, height, and all the rest of it, and then we're returning it to the calling function. So again, if I run this in a debug mode, and we wait for it to reach, no, we don't need that one. Let's just go on. Oh, that's annoying. It's gone past that, so let's stop that. Anyway, we'll probably not be able to do that. Let me just try it once more. No, it's just carried on to the game, so no worries. But anyway, the fields here would be visible in the. Let's just untick that and go back to main. So we're setting the game state, which is what I was looking for. From here, you can set it. We've got menu as 1, play as 2, leaderboard 3, and quit 4. One thing to remember with Lua is that it is not zero based, as every other language that I'm aware of is. Lua's indexes start at 1, so the first entry of a list is index 1, not index 0. So do bear that in mind when you're using it, because it's easy to get confused. So let's go back to main. So we're setting the game state to play, which is 2, if I remember right. Let's just go back to shared. Yeah, play equals 2. Now, we don't have a game loop in Love2D. It's done automatically, so we don't have to create our own loop. This function player update and this function draw runs at 60 times a second, come hell or high water. We don't have to run a loop. It's kind of done automatically for us. So once we've set up our player here, then 60 times a second it's going to update, and then it's going to draw whatever we set it up to. So the update, as you can see, is quite simple. We're checking whether the keyboard key that's down is left or A, and if it is, we're going to change the position of the rectangle by the speed times delta time. Now, delta time, if you're not familiar with it, is the time elapsed since the last time this function was called. So that it's normally a very small fraction of a second, but it allows you to make sure that whatever the performance of the computer you're running on, it will operate at the same speed on a very low powered machine as in a very high powered machine, by compensating by using this delta time to keep a smooth movement from side to side. So we're checking which key we've pressed, and then increasing or decreasing the position of the rectangle depending on the key that we pressed down. Here we're checking to see whether the rectangle is bashing against the left hand side. If it's less than 0, then we set it back to 0, and here we're checking to see whether it's bashing against the right hand side, and if so, we set it back there. And here we're actually drawing the rectangle, so we have to set the color first using this Love graphics set color, and we're setting it to green, and then we're doing a rectangle, drawing a rectangle, which you've got a choice of. You can either have fill, as we've got it there, or you can have line, which will give it the rectangle in just a line shape. And then for the X, Y, width and height, we're giving it the rectangle data structure that we've already created. And then we're returning that player back to where it was before. So let's just go back to main. So when the update function runs every 60 times a second, it finds out what state the keyboard's in, if we've decided to quit by pressing the escape key or clicking the cross button on the window, it will quit. If not, if we're in the play game state, then it will update the player and the player will move one side to the other. And then in the draw function, it will call the draw player function. So you can see inside our player, we've got its own draw function. So that means that every time we add a new object here, we can just add that new object's draw function, and it'll just draw them one after the other. So at the moment, that's just going to draw the player, which uses the setting the color to green and then drawing the rectangle. So if you've looked at the similar versions for both Monogame and Python, this will now look very familiar, so that you've got the same processes are going on, just using the differences in languages, which is the whole purpose of this tutorial, is to allow you to see how they all have their similarities and slight differences, and then to help you decide which one you find most useful. So I think that will do for this version. So look out for the Monogame and for the Pygame versions of the exact same, moving this dangerous rectangle from side to side. Now this video is just to show you how to set up Love2D and the ZeroBrane Lua editor as in the same way that I like to use it in my videos. So it's a kind of a personal way of doing things, but it might be helpful for those who are not familiar. I'm running a virtual machine here with Windows 11 because this means that none of the software that I use is installed. So it's kind of showing you from the start how to get everything done. Now first we need to go to ZeroBrane itself. So there's the URL. I'll put it into the description below. So ZeroBrane Studio, and download here. I've already donated, so I'm going to skip this one and take me straight to the download page this time. And obviously I want Windows 32-bit. I would suggest using the installer if you're just going to put it in the default place. So let's download that. And we'll run that. It's going to put it in the normal program files position by just following that. And there we go, it's simple as that. Let's just get this out of the way. So what we've got when you just open the default one, just expand that a little bit, is the kind of light background with a whole bunch of samples which are in the download directory. So it gives you a bunch of stuff you can look at, but obviously that's not going to be that helpful for what we want. Now I've made a Lua file that will allow you to alter the settings for all of this stuff here. So if you go to Edit, Preferences, you'll get a Settings System and a Settings User. So if we go to Settings System first, you'll see that it's kind of a blank file and it allows you to put pretty much what you like in. Let me just get that out of the way for a minute. Now on my Pastebin account, which is this one here, again I'll put this in the description, I have this config file which I use to configure Lua with. So if you go to the raw paste data and then just Control A to select and Control C to copy, and then we'll go back to the ZeroBrane file here and paste that in, and that will set things up for, although it says user.lua, this one is actually the system one. And what I've done is to change some of the features, to change the text size, shape and so on, and also there is here some files that you can use to determine what color you'd like the the background. I'm currently quite liking Monogame, so what we'll do here is to put a double minus in there and remove that there. So this one is commenting out these other styles and allowing us to use the Monogame version. The only other thing that might need changing is this path up here. I would suggest we leave that as it is for the moment, but it will probably be there when it's done, but we'll come back to that shortly. So we can now save that file, and you can also do the same for the preferences user, and again you can paste exactly the same one in. I believe the user one overrides the general one, so again we'll just put the right one in there. So we've now got this Monogame one in. Save again, and what we'll do now is to close that down, and then next time we run it, if I can remember how to do that, and you'll see it now comes up with the different colour instead of the default one. So that's changed a lot of stuff. Over here, to get away from these ones, you would need to have to choose your location. So if I just minimize that for a minute, and then we'll open a file here. It doesn't matter where you put it. Let's choose, I'll put it just straight in the C drive for the time being, a kind of a repository for where you want to do your stuff. So we'll go for a new folder, and we'll call it let's call it Love2D projects. There we go. So we've just created that in the root of the C drive. Let's go back to this one. So we can now change the project Lua interpreter to the project directory, choose, and then we're going to go to, currently it's where the downloads are, which is not terribly helpful, and then we want local disk C, Love2D project, select folder. There we go. So we've got, the folder is there, but currently there's nothing in it. We don't need these. So this one is kind of the base folder. So we now need to install Love2D itself. So again, we'll just minimize that, and we'll go back to, there we are. So we go on to love2d.org. There, you'll find it there, and you'll see the downloaders here. This is a 64-bit. Again, I'm going to put it in the default directory, so we'll go for the 64-bit installer. There we go. Okay, so you could probably see as it was installing that it was indeed going into the C directory program files, I believe it was. Let me just check. Yes, it was. So it was the x86, sorry, the 64-bit one there, and there's the executable. So if we Control C that, go back to here, again we're going to edit preferences on the system, and where we've got Love2D here, we're going to put that in. I suspect that might work better if we change that to forward slash. So we'll just copy that. So that's where it's going. If I can just highlight that, that's better. And then we'll put it in the other one as well, which was the settings there. Okay, and then save, close those, and again we'll restart this. And now we should be able to go project Lua interpreter, and you'll see that love is now available so that we can choose that for our interpreter. Now, for any Love2D project, you need to have it in its own folder. So if we go new directory, and let's call this game 1, then you'll actually have to now choose, for this to work, from the project directory, choose. We're now going to choose game 1. So everything has to go in the root folder, and the first file you need is one called main. And this is the one that you'll be working on. I won't bother to put any of the code in here because that's what we'll be covering in the main tutorial series, but at least shows you now how you can get this set up and get it working so that if you're following along the tutorial series, you'll be seeing the same thing as I do here.